You're obviously on the internet right now, so I can tell you with near certainty that you will be phished. Plenty of criminal gangs are working right as we speak on tricking people to give away their login name and password, and sooner or later they'll do that to you. They've probably already done that to you, and you were smart enough to spot them. But the day they catch you off guard, you're going to be very sorry. What can you do to stay safe from this threat? Where can you turn to for trustworthy advice? Well, you've come to the right place. Welcome to Frank Stajano Explains. I am Professor of Security and Privacy at the Computer Science Department of the University of Cambridge. I also run my own security company, Cambridge Cyber, serving clients in government, industry and academia. It would cost you way too much for you as a private individual to hire Cambridge Cyber, but if you want to be safe from phishing, I'm about to give you some clear, simple and actionable security suggestions at no charge as a public service. You won't need a computer science degree to understand them. All you will need is the attention span to watch this video until the end. And I thank my YouTube friend, Professor Tatiana Rodriguez Leal, who suggested I do a few practical computer science videos for normal people and not just for those who study my subject at university. Of the many ways you can be attacked by criminals online, phishing is one of the most prevalent. Unlike the more technical attacks that exploit security vulnerabilities in your computer, phishing attacks you, the human in the loop. Phishing is where the criminals persuade you to give them your username and password, without realizing you're doing so, of course. And I get plenty of these emails, and I'm sure you do too. They look like this. Most of them you can recognize immediately as frauds, but sometimes they can be subtle and tricky and catch you off guard, especially if by chance you were expecting something similar. And it's enough to fall for this scam just once to end up in a lot of trouble, lose money, feel violated, and have to waste hours and hours on the phone with customer service or even the police in a vain attempt to get your money back. And you don't want to be in that situation. Why is phishing so commonplace? Because it's really easy to do for the crook. They spend a little time crafting a plausible email using a bit of psychology, and to be honest, the crooks are actually much better psychologists than your typical computer scientist. And we once did a fascinating study on the psychology of scam victims, which I discuss in that lecture up there, and I could tell you exactly which psychological principles are being exploited during phishing, such as distraction, authority, and time pressure, and so on. But let's not get too sidetracked. The point I was making is that with phishing, the crooks don't have to do anything technically sophisticated. They just buy long lists of email addresses and they send their fraudulent email to all of them. They set up a fake website that looks like the login screen of your bank or email provider or tax office and whatever. That's very easy to do, and they send you to it. Most recipients will ignore the email, but a small fraction of a percent will reply and will enter their genuine credentials. And since emailing millions of people is essentially free and effortless for the crooks, it doesn't matter that the return rate is very low. So phishing is easy, cheap and profitable, and that's why phishing is so prevalent and has been for many years. What do I personally do about this to protect myself? Well, if I got a mail that said, "My account with Lloyds Bank is compromised," I would immediately know it was a fake, for the simple and obvious reasons that I just don't have an account with Lloyds Bank. So, from the very beginning in the early 2000s, my security solution to phishing has been simply to refuse to give my bank my email address. Dear bank, if you want to tell me something important, send me snail mail like you've always done until now. That way, if I ever receive an email pretending to be from my bank, I know for sure it's a fake, because I have never given my email address to the bank. So this is a strategy that's totally foolproof. It's correct every time, and it requires no thought from me. Now, this simple tactic of mine worked well for about 10 or 15 years, but unfortunately at some point, with everything becoming more digital and online, it became impossible to open any new accounts or to activate any new features of existing accounts without giving them an email address. So I moved to another strategy of giving my bank a unique email address that I don't use with anyone else. And then I wrote a little rule in my email program that if I receive an email sent to that unique address, then it goes into a special folder of mail from my bank. So if I ever get an email that pretends to be from my bank but doesn't land into that folder, then I know it's a fake, because the only address my bank knows to use for me is that special one, and no one else knows that address. And of course, I have to replicate this strategy for my stockbroker, my internet provider, my tax account, and any other account that I care about. This strategy requires the ability of creating arbitrarily many email addresses that all get redirected to my normal email, and one must be a bit of a nerd, to be honest, to make it work well. So while it works fine for me, I don't really recommend this strategy to regular human beings. To defeat phishing, ideally you want to stop the bad guys from ever writing to you, but that's essentially impossible. The next best thing is to make it obvious that their emails are fraudulent, and that's what I do for myself with the strategy that I just described. But it requires some geekiness and some discipline, so it doesn't work for everyone. So yet another thing that we can do is to stop ourselves from accidentally giving our credentials to the fraudsters. And this is what I recommend normal people do, with a two-pronged strategy consisting of Bookmark and Password Manager, under the assumption that your device itself is secure, but let's leave that for later. So first of all, go to the official login page of your bank and set a bookmark for it, preferably one you can then reach with a single click in some kind of toolbar. So easy to reach. You will need to learn how to do that in your particular browser. Make sure that when you click on the bookmark, it takes you to the genuine login page of your bank. Then make it an unbreakable rule for yourself that if you ever type any login credentials for your bank, you will only ever do so after reaching the login page from your bookmark. You will never type your credentials in a page you reached by following a link in an email or a link in another page or any other way. So just doing this first prong of only ever accessing the login page of your bank through a bookmark that you established once and for all, that's already a pretty decent anti-phishing protection. It's pretty strong. But you can add the second prong for additional protection. And the second prong is the password manager. When the site wants you to type a password, let the integrated password manager in your browser handle that. Let the password manager generate a complicated random password instead of inventing a memorable password yourself. And then let the password manager remember it instead of remembering it yourself. And let the password manager fill it in whenever you visit that login page. And this has several benefits. First of all, you won't have to remember the password yourself. Second, the password will be too complex for an attacker to guess, whether online or offline. Third, the password will be different from the ones you use on other sites, and so if one of these other sites gets compromised through no fault of your own, then your account here won't be affected. And finally, and most importantly as a protection against phishing, the password manager in your browser will only enter the password on this particular web page, not on any other fake web page created by the fraudsters. So if you also make it a rule that you will never enter the password yourself, but you will always let the password manager fill it in, then when the password manager doesn't fill in the password, it's a sign that you're probably not on the genuine login page, and this strategy just saved you. So it's a belt and braces approach, and if you adopt both of these two simple tricks, the bookmark and the in-browser password manager, you will be a lot safer from phishing than if you don't. Of course, the price you pay is that you have to repeat this setup procedure for each of the important accounts you want to protect against phishing. Nowadays, there is also another safeguard that many banks and financial institutions have adopted, namely multifactor authentication. When you attempt to log in, you also get another message through some other channel, such as an email or a short message on your phone containing a code that you need to retype in your browser, or something on a separate gadget device that you have to respond to a challenge and so on. So this gives you additional protection against phishing at the price of making the login process a little slower and more cumbersome. The presence of two-factor authentication does not invalidate my previous suggestion. Even if you use two-factor, adopting my recommended bookmark and password manager strategy will still protect your first factor. And of course, sometimes you want to protect against phishing on some site that does not use two-factor, for example, let's say your webmail provider, and there the bookmark and password manager are going to be your main defense. Now, as a security professional, I'm happy to offer you some free advice, but if you want it to work for you, then you have to understand what you're doing and take responsibility for it. My advice is appropriate within some plausible assumptions, but you must understand what they are, and you must check that they apply to you before doing what I suggest. I'm helping you protect yourself against phishing, that is to say, a remote attacker who does not have control over your computer. And I'm assuming that your computer or your phone or whatever it is that you use to log in is itself secure. And I am not advising you on how to achieve that. This could be a separate video if you ask for it in the comments. But I am currently working on the assumption that your computer, your device, is physically secure. That you always update the operating system and browser to the latest available version, that you keep the computer locked when it's not in use, ideally you even use full disk encryption and so on and so forth. Otherwise, anyone who can walk up to your computer and use it or gain controls over your computer through the network could then use your password manager to log into your account. And in that case, my recommendation is clearly not suitable for your situation and would need to be changed accordingly. You must also understand that this recipe offers protection specifically against phishing, not against every possible cybersecurity attack. It won't make you invulnerable. It won't protect you against cross-site scripting or against vulnerabilities in your operating system and so on and so forth. Phishing is a widespread threat, so it's reasonable to address it first, but it's by no means the only threat that exists. If you wish me to talk about any others, then ask me in the comments, feel free. But now we're talking about phishing. You're not expected to become a cybersecurity expert, but at least take this away from this video. Every security choice is a trade-off, and there are no absolutes. Nothing will make you totally secure against every possible attack. If anybody promises that, they are tricking you. Okay, they're promising the moon. They can't deliver on that. And most forms of protections come at some cost, perhaps in terms of money, or perhaps in terms of convenience, as we hinted at when we mentioned the two-factor authentication. So yes, two-factor protects you against phishing, but it makes life a bit more cumbersome every time you log in. And the best security decisions are the ones that hit the sweet spot in that multi-dimensional trade-off. So the ones that give you the best increase in protection for the least cost and the least amount of extra hassle. And that's what a good security professional will help you find, the optimum trade-off for your situation. You are not my security client and I don't know your circumstances, so the advice that I give in this video is not optimized for your particular situation. Maybe you never lock your computer, for example, or you're a commuter and you often lose your computer on the train, and for you there's maybe another security trade-off that would work better than what I just said. Should you perhaps use a master password on your password manager? Should you use a password manager that syncs across devices through the cloud? Should you use the password manager at all? All this depends on your own circumstances. But under the broad and hopefully reasonable assumptions that I stated, I believe I've given you some simple, easy to understand and actionable advice that will make you much safer against phishing than if you didn't follow it. And all that at what I consider a tolerable one-off cost in terms of additional setup hassle. If you found this video useful, please leave a like on it. It really helps my channel and I appreciate it. Subscribe for more videos like this and ask me in the comments if there are other topics in cybersecurity or computing in general on which you would like to hear some clear and useful explanations from this computer science professor at Cambridge. Thank you very much and until next time.